Hi, everybody, it's Jim Siegel. The United We Stand Club of Central Florida has asked me to prepare this lecture on an important issue regarding U.S. China relations. Whether the U.S. and China trade deficit, indeed the entire trade policy, is a serious problem or no big deal. Just to be clear, I'm not an economist or an international financier. But I am an expert at consumer and business insights and research. Regretfully, economists don't agree at all on the answer to this question. Worse, their opinions and reporting by most of the media seem tinged by political bias. Saying that this is a complex topic is a serious understatement. We'd have to go through all these binders of hardcore economic theory. Boring. So to make this topic both easy to understand and engaging, I have identified a few video clips that will provide a broad understanding without getting hung up in tedious minutia. They involve this man, this organization, and this company. But before we begin, here's a few background exhibits from three sources: the CIA, the Department of Commerce, and a London-based macroeconomics firm. China's landmass is only a bit larger than the United States, but China has more than 4 times as many people. Yet the U.S. is an economic powerhouse. Not surprisingly, the U.S. has much higher GDP per capita. Since the 1970s, the U.S. has run a budget deficit in just about every year, spending more than it takes in. Lately, the Chinese government has also been reporting a deficit each year. So, with that background, let's finally go to the topic of this lecture: balance of trade, exports minus imports. China has the most favorable trade balance in the world, that red bar. The U.S. has the worst, the blue bar at the top of the right column. That trade is made up of goods, merchandise, and services, for instance, tourism. Let's look at merchandise only for a moment. China has the most merchandise exports by a wide margin over the United States. The United States has the most imports, that blue line. That's bad for balance of trade. China is second, that red bar, and a lot of that are parts that are assembled by Chinese workers and shipped out as exports. What are the products that the U.S. imports from China? Here's the top categories. No surprises here. What are the products that the U.S. sends to China, exports? Well, aircraft are the highest percentage, and we'll hear more about that later, with agricultural products in second place. We've heard a lot lately about the tariff war, significant increases since the president took office. That's a hot topic of debate. Will that help reduce the trade deficit? Indeed. Is the deficit a problem? We'll get into that. But it's important to understand that tariffs are nothing new. Here's a graph since 1800 of U.S. tariffs as a percent of the value of imports into the United States. Recently, they've been at historic lows until an increase in the last couple of years. The president has used the threat of tariffs to renegotiate trade deals. And here's the results, short term anyway. In February, the deficit was down to a seasonally adjusted 1 month of $40 billion from the peak of $60 billion a month the year before. And the president signed a historic agreement with China in January, which should reduce the deficit even more. But that gets us back to the original question. Is the deficit a problem? Indeed. Might it even be good? As I mentioned earlier, there is wide disagreement about that, but no shortage of opinions. I Googled U.S.-China trade war and got more than 20 pages of stories. So I chose 3 among those. 3 that I believe are easy to understand, engaging, and most importantly, instructive. Let's first take a look at this one. It was near the top of that list that Google generated.
A trade deficit is the difference between exports and imports. And for the United States, it's often negative. It has been negative with China for about close to 20 years. And it's grown because the U.S. has consumed more goods from China than it has exported to China. One reason for this is because U.S. firms often set up shop in China as part of foreign direct investment in China in order to produce goods using cheap labor and then to re-export them back to the United States. It's these companies, these multinational firms, that create a lot of profits. And at the same time, they generate jobs in the United States in the services sector by hiring people who do advertising or marketing or financial aspects for their companies. In addition to that, a lot of goods are simply processed in China. So that means that some goods are produced in other nations, especially in East and Southeast Asia, and they're processed or put together in China and then re-exported to the United States. So it's far more complex than China just producing goods and sending them over to us and us shipping goods to them. Now, some people have pointed to the trade deficit as something that is very bad, while others see it as something that is relatively neutral. President Trump has pointed to it as a symbol of U.S. weakness, and other China hawks have viewed it as a way in which China has attempted to exploit the United States. Economists don't see it that way. And the reason for that is because it makes consumption for American households far cheaper than if American firms simply produced goods in the United States, in which case they would have to pay far higher wages. Certainly, it has reduced the number of manufacturing jobs that are housed in the United States because labor in developing countries like China or Vietnam is far cheaper than it is here. So China takes the dollars that we use to pay for goods imported from China, and they can either hold the dollars in terms of reserves or invest the funds in the United States, mainly in the form of treasury bonds. So they're holding U.S. debt, which allows America to spend more overall. So in general, it has been a positive for the United States. President Trump misunderstands and misinterprets what the trade deficit is. He seems to view it as a debt, a win or lose game, a zero-sum game, when in actuality, most economists view trade as a win-win solution, because in most cases, countries export the goods that they have a comparative advantage in that's relatively cheaper for them to produce, and they import goods that are relatively more expensive for them to produce. And so in this way, both countries are thought to win out from trade. So a trade deficit is merely a measure of exports and imports. It's not about who is winning or who is losing.
So I said to myself, I wonder who this organization is. CGTN. So I went to Wikipedia. It turns out it's the China Global Television Network, an arm of the Chinese government and the Communist Party. Now let's go to video number 2 featuring this man.
Look, there's a lot of different kind of wars that take place around the world. Some of them end up costing lives. But the one we're going to talk about today is a trade war. this doesn't cost you your life, but this could end up costing your job and your small business. And that is the US-China trade war that is taking place. Now, having said this, in this video, we're going to go a different angle. We're going to talk about 7 reasons why I believe this is taking place. We're going to talk about what Donald Trump's motivation is behind this and who needs to and a lot of other factors. But the one thing that we are going to talk about is a vision that the leaders of China unveiled in 2015 to their people, talking about how China will one day be the most powerful economic empire in the world by 2025, where their currency, the yuan, will be more powerful than the US dollar, and a few other strategies that they had in place, and the 5 ways of making that become a reality. So those are the things we're going to talk about in today's video. So before we get right into it, let's first talk about the word tariff, what it means, and why countries put a tariff on other countries to import their products in. So first, a tariff is a tax. For instance, you bring your products from China to US, I put a 25% tariff on this product. So if you bring $100 billion, you're going to have to pay another $25 billion on top of that $100 billion. That's the tariff. This is why you'll notice a lot of times where when people come here from Europe, they look at a Camaro and they say, oh my gosh, that's such a luxury car. It's an exotic car. Look at that. But Americans look at Camaro and they're like, it's just a Camaro you can buy for $28,000. But Europeans don't pay $28,000. They may pay $40,000 for it. Just like when Americans go to Europe and they say, cab drivers driving around a Mercedes. Cops have Mercedes. What is this all about? Because what a Camaro is in US is exactly what a Mercedes is in Germany, right? So part of tariff is to protect the businesses in your country so the business flows through your job creators, not somebody else's, but you're willing to allow them to come in and compete. So that's a tariff. Now, trade deficit. What is a trade deficit? This is where a big part of this war started taking place. Let me explain to you what a trade deficit is. Here's US trade deficit. US imports $3.1 trillion in, meaning countries around the world want to do business in America, and America allows them to come in. Last year, $3.1 trillion. Now, U.S. gives other countries only $2.5 trillion. So 3.1 coming in, but only 2.5 going out. Now think about this. U.S. is only 330 million people around the world. The world has another 6.8 billion. But there's the same amount business being in U.S. than out, because everybody wants to be in America. So that creates a $600 billion deficit. Now, out of this $3.1 trillion that comes in, 539 is China, which is 17.3%. But out of our $2.5 trillion that goes out, only 120 billion is China, which is 4.8%. Meaning, China is giving us less than we are giving them. China's making more because we're allowing them to compete in America way more than we are doing in America. Somebody may say, well, it's not like they're not allowing you. They just don't have a need for you there. And you would like them to come here because of cheap labor and all this other stuff. Let me continue. The total deficit, again, 621 billion. But out of the 621, 419 is China alone, which is 67% of the deficit. 67% of the deficit. So President Trump is sitting there saying, well, wait a minute. Why are we giving them so much money? And why are we not getting anything for this? Why are we not doing it in America? Why are we creating jobs over there? Why are we not keeping this to ourselves? Why are we helping their economy? Aren't they trying to compete with us? Aren't they coming up from like nobody to now number 7, number 8, number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2? They're wanting to compete with America. What is going on over here? No. Let's find out what we produce well. We export grain, wheat, corn, soybean, meat, pork, poultry, mechanical parts like chips, different kind of things. China exports electronic parts, wooden furniture, aluminum car parts, fashion accessories like the handbags, seafood. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so that's what we export. How come we're not doing more? Why are we giving them so much money? Why are they doing so well? We're helping them. Aren't we helping them become closer to us? I don't know why this is taking place. So, what are the reasons for this trade war? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind it? Here's what you got to realize. Anytime you're dealing with politics, you're dealing with power. Motivation for business owners is money and freedom and financial freedom and control. Leave me alone. But when it comes down to politics, power is key. Then it's economy, then it's politics, which is ideology. China is trying to say our ideology works because we have the kinds of people that follow what we tell them. We are leaders. We tell them what to do and they do it. America is weak leaders because their people always tell them what to do. The voters always tell them what to do. And you always know what America is doing. America, matter of fact, everyone knows their bad news because they have freedom of speech and they have freedom of press China, we know everything America is doing. America has no clue what we're doing. We are more powerful. And America's trying to say, hey, people are better if they have a freedom of speech. Let Americans speak. Let us have freedom of press. We believe we have a better empire. There's a bit of an ideology going on there with communism and capitalism. Then you have obviously competition. Everybody's competing. You got money, you got market, you got control. Now, all that being said and done, what's President Trump's motivation? Some people are saying, why did he all of a sudden start picking on China? It's not a new thing. In 2014, when President Trump wasn't President Trump, he was Donald Trump, AKA apprentice, you're fired. Here's what he tweeted in May of 2014. Remember, China is not a friend of the United States. Look at how many likes this tweet got. And it was only retweeted 345 times. You know what that means? Nobody was really paying attention to what he was saying about politics back then. But this China thing is not a new thing with President Trump. He's been thinking about this for a while. So now, what is he wanting to do? What's his motivation behind this? What is he doing? Is it the fact that he wants to keep manufacturing jobs in the U.S.? Is that what it is? Is it the fact that he wants to reduce the U.S.-China trade deficit? Maybe he wants that 419 to go lower? Is it the fact that he still wants to keep U.S. as the dominant power, doesn't want to give anybody else a shot? Maybe it's the fact that he's trying to get U.S. out of debt, because U.S. owes China $1.13 trillion of debt, and it used to be $1.3 trillion in 2013, and it's $1.13 trillion. Maybe this is a way for him to learn to get out of this debt, because he's used to eliminating debt. They used to owe $1 billion to a bank. And this is maybe his comfort zone. It's like, I'm okay with this. I can handle things like this. Maybe it's him bullying the bully. A lot of people are afraid of China. A lot of people are saying, well, I'm not going to say anything because we need them. We need them. We need them. There's only one country that maybe doesn't need China, that maybe China needs more than they need them. And he's like, well, my position, I'm going to get out there and say something about this. And I'm going to bully the bully. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it is the vision that China launched back in 2015 to their people called Made in China 2025. And here's what Made in China 2025 was. Some may say this is brilliant. Some may say it's manipulative. But all I can tell you is this 100% benefits China more than anybody else. So part one of the 5-point game plan is setting explicit targets. Here's what that means. Chinese government is pressuring private companies to adjust their vision to China's 2025 vision. So saying, here's what we're doing. We would like you to do anything you do with your company to help us reach this vision as a whole. Which some may say, okay, that's cool. That's a visionary. Somebody else saying, why are you pressuring us? Why are you making us do it? Maybe we want to do something else. But that's what China's doing. Number two, providing subsidies, $300 billion investments. This is going to be very low interest rate loans, whatever they can do to help these businesses grow. And we're talking $300 billion of China's going to lend, give, invest into private companies, right? Number three is foreign investment and acquisitions. Government is encouraging companies to invest into semiconductor firms to gain access to their technology. Well, what do you mean? Well, we want you to go buy and invest into semiconductor companies in the U.S. So we find out exactly what they're doing with their technology. And you know how much they put in 2016? $45 billion into U.S. companies. And they invest and like, oh, this is what they do. Let's do this in China. Oh my gosh, this is what they do. Let's do this in China. That's the third one. Point number four is mobilizing state-backed companies. What does that mean? State-backed, meaning companies that are owned by the government. This is kind of like, CIA investing into Facebook. I mean, imagine if that happened to America. CIA is wanting Facebook to do better because they get all the data, because that's where all your information is. That's one of their game plans. And last but not least, point number five, which is probably the one that's concerning the most people. EU is not happy about this. Central America is not happy about this. Brazil's not happy about this. Middle East is not happy. A lot of people are not happy about this. Here's what it is. Number five, forced transfer agreement. Here's what this means. If you choose to do business in China, they are forcing you to share all your trade secrets with them. All. You're Boeing, you want to go into China, you want to do business out there, guess what, Boeing? Share all your trade secrets with us, then we're going to go design our own Boeing. That's what China is doing. And this right here got a lot of people concerned. A lot of people are saying, wait a minute, that's not fair. You can come and do business in our country. We don't ask you to do all this stuff. You can come do business here, but if I want to go do business in China, I have to share with you all my trade secrets? Yes, that's the game plan. Why are they doing this? Here's why. U.S. is good at, ideas and innovation. U.S. is good at free market competition. They don't mind competition. They want new companies coming out there competing with the rest of them. U.S. is good at technology. China, on the other hand, they're good at cheap labor. Very cheap labor. You hear a lot of these videos and these stories about what it takes and how hard kids work and how much money they're making per day, but they're good at cheap labor. And a lot of people say, wait a minute, if I can get somebody to work with me for $5 a day, here you go. They're good at copying. You hear a lot of times, here's Nike, but you got another one made in, China's version that says Nike or whatever it's called, but it's a similar kind of a whoosh. They're very good at copying products, right? But they're also very good at manufacturing. So it's kind of like they're good at copying, but they're good at manufacturing. So maybe we need them. Why are you doing this? Man, they find out about a product, they unpack the product, then they make the same exact product for a fifth of the price. We're not helping ourselves. What is going on over here, right? So U.S. knows this is taking place, and this is why it's leading us to who is this hurting the most? A lot of people are concerned. I think this is hurting a lot of people. Well, who's hurting it the most? Who's taking the biggest hit? So we were saying, other foreign relationships, some of these tariffs that Trump imposed on other countries, immediately Brazil came out, wait a minute, that tariff you put on China is hurting us. Then Trump came out and said, okay, this tariff excludes Brazil. Then Brazil took their tariff down. U.S. put a tariff on China about certain products. Canada, Mexico came back and said, wait a minute, this is hurting us. We are threatening to put an impose to U.S. on such and such product that you import to us. Then Trump's like, okay, this tariff is only China, right? So a part of this is also hurting relationships with other countries. Number two, it's hurting the small business owner. A lot of these small business owners are relying on buying a product for a certain price and selling it for retail to make money. Wait a minute, I'm having to pay more. I'm having to spend more. I'm not making the same kind of profits. Number three, farmers in U.S., just between January to March, 2 months, 3 months, farmers in U.S. lost $11.8 billion in 3 months, farmers. By the way, in, I believe it's Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana, highest rate of bankruptcies in the last decade. In those areas, they are taking a big hit, and obviously consumers are also taking a big hit. And you hear the whole thing. Wow, it's short-term pain for long-term gain. This is why we're doing this, because we're gonna have long-term gain. No one really knows this. We are currently in the short-term pain process. We're not yet in the long-term gain process. So having said this, some of the people say, wait a minute, Pat. What about this fact that what if China realizes that, hey, if you want to play this game with us, don't you owe us $1.13 trillion? What if China sells their debt? What happens there? Could that affect the U.S. economy in a massive way? I mean, let's face it. China's got $1.13 trillion in T-bills, 10-year Treasury bills, Treasury bonds. And the current rate, I believe, is 3.4%. And by the way, U.S. also owes Japan, I think it's 1.07 trillion, and U.S. owes Brazil 308 billion, and UK 284 billion, and Ireland 274 billion. What do we do? What if China sells the debt? What if they do? Here's what happens if China sells the debt. What happened in 2008? The massive market crash that we faced in 2008 in U.S., where the market tanked nearly 40% in a year. I'll never forget that. I'm in the financial industry. I'm a Series 7 financial advisor. Sincere, and we're like, boom, 38%. Clients calling. As bad as that was, it's going to be worse if China does this. And you know who affects the most if this happens? China. China's going to take the biggest hit. China will be one of the ones that takes the biggest hit in this. Why will China take the biggest hit? Because remember, if that happens, what are they going to do with this? This is a big part of the economy, $539.5 billion. So now you're listening to this and you say, well, Pat, who needs two more? Who needs two more? I mean, U.S. relies on the cheap labor. Let's face it, we need them. And China kind of relies on us for our U.S. goods. They need us, but who needs more? So here's the part that President Trump is used to. If there's one thing President Trump is used to, he knows negotiation and he knows leverage. This is what I mean. He may not be the most, likable guy out there in the world. Not a lot of people like this guy, and it's for obvious reasons. He goes after people hardcore, but he knows leverage. What do I mean by leverage? He knows these guys need it. I mean, one time President Trump owed $1 billion to the bank, and somebody asked him and says, aren't you worried that you owe the bank $1 billion? He says, why should I be worried? The bank should be worried. I have their $1 billion. They're the ones that should be worried. So he realizes China should be worried. They have our 1.1, we have their $1.13 trillion. And in this entire leverage game, China also has to realize their net migration rate, which is how many people are moving to China, is one of the lowest net migration rates in the world. It's in the negative, while U.S. migration rate is the highest in the world. We take more immigrants than any other country in the world. It's not even close. We're number one. Even though you hear all this stuff about immigration, everybody in the world wants to come to America. Not everybody in the world is wanting to go to China. Why is that? You know, this whole thing that you hear, if you go search right now, forget about where I'm at, go search right now, China's unemployment rate. And look how weird it is. The last 20 years, 3.4%, 3.5%, 3.8%, 3.2%. How do we know that's accurate? Remember, free press in US. There's no free press type of stuff going on in China. You don't hear Democrats and Republicans going at it. One of the best things for America is the fact that we have Democrats going against Republicans and Republicans going against Democrats. There's always this push so you can kind of sit there and say, there's the truth. There's the truth. There's the truth. Oh, these guys are playing the games. There is none of that. Some people say the unemployment in China is around 14%, 13.8, 14%. By the way, CNBC did an article saying a third of millionaires in China want to leave for 3 reasons. Number 1 is education. Number 2 is polluted cities. And number 3 is their government has way too much control over their people. So what's going to really happen here? How long is this really going to last? Because when you're looking at this saying, well, Pat, I don't really understand what's going to happen. Here's the reality of it. It's really who can hold out the longest right now. Really, who can afford the longest right now? You know, when the mortgage crisis took place and a lot of people lost a lot of things, there were also a lot of people that became very wealthy afterwards. You know why? It's because who had the most cash and who was the most stable. In this situation, whoever's most stable, whoever has most cash, whoever needs the other person less is going to win here. And eventually, someone's going to come out of it. Because what President Trump is starting to realize is he's saying, wait a minute. What if we make those jobs come to America? What if we do manufacturing in America? What if we bring those jobs back? Well, what if we make all that money come back here? Well, what if we're making iPhones here? And forget about what if we don't make them here. How about we go to another country that doesn't offer high tariffs? How about we go to another place that's not offering us as expensive as it is? Why don't you go to another Asian country that's out there, but don't go to China? Because he realizes this vision that China has, they want power. They want domination. They want to be number one. And President Trump is extremely competitive. And he's not okay with that happening on his turf. Could it happen 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now? I don't know. I can't predict the future. What I can tell you is this trade war that's going on, it's all about leverage. And whoever has the most leverage is probably going to end up winning at the end. And I don't know who it's going to be. But for this situation as we're looking at, we can tell who has the leverage. So having said that, if you watch this video and you're kind of worried about a possible market crash, I got another video I want you to watch. It's called The Next Market Crash and 8 Ways to Prepare for It. Here's the thumbnail. If you haven't watched it, you click on it to go watch. We'll put a link below as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. And if you got any thoughts or questions, comment below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Maybe I've been asleep, but I don't recall hearing about China's 2025 plan. I suspect that it hasn't escaped interest in Washington, at least in some quarters. Pat Bet David mentioned Huawei in his video. It turns out this company is a very interesting case. Let's take a look.
So I recently asked the following question on Twitter. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Huawei? And I got a lot of different response. Some people said they've never heard of it before. Some said it's a great phone. Some said espionage. Some said it's a terrible phone. A few people thought it was a vacation spot, like they thought it was Hawaii. But the real question is, why is President Donald Trump signing an executive order calling Huawei a threat to national security? Why? What's so big deal about them? Why is the director of NSA, FBI, CIA saying, hey, American users, do not touch the device if it's Huawei. Don't even get close to it. Why are so many people around the world from the intelligence community worried about Huawei? What is it? Is there something you and I don't know about? Is it the tariffs again? Is it a trade war? Is it maybe a cyber war? Maybe somebody's spying on you and I. What is it? We're going to get into that today. Before I get into it, you may be asking yourself, Pat, why do I need to know about Huawei? A few different reasons. Number one, this could cause a market correction of 10, 20, 30% if it doesn't work out. Number two, it's cybersecurity privacy. It's a big part of this, so you kind of want to know what's going on here. And then last but not least, conversation started in the world of business. People are going to ask about Huawei. You not have an opinion about it. Having said that, let's get into it. First, I'm going to talk about 9 reasons why they were banned. Then we're going to talk about their numbers. Then we're going to talk about 5G. Then timeline of what took place with Huawei from 1987 to today. So having said that, let's get into 9 reasons. Number 1, espionage. Why espionage? Is China using Huawei to spy on U.S. and other countries? Is that really what it is? Number 2, competition. Is this U.S.'s way of protecting their golden child of Apple, which has cost Tim Cook and Donald Trump to become texting terms today. They're best friends because Tim Cook just met with Donald Trump on June 13th on Thursday, and they're having conversations. Why? Because Apple's the golden child company. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, everybody uses their phones. I would much rather have Apple win than Huawei win. Could it be Iran violating the U.S. sanctions because of what happened in China with the CFO? We'll talk about that later on. Is it 5G? Is it first to? Is it who gets 5G first? And how much is that worth to the GDP, whichever country gets 5G first? Is it power, worldwide domination? Is it cyber war insurance policy? Because what if a cyber war happens? This is our way of the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI preventing us of somebody else, a major empire that went from being top 10 to now being top in the second place and wants to be the most dominant empire worldwide, spying on America. This is our way of saying, hey, you cannot come and find out what we're doing here. Stealing trade secrets, similar going back to Made in China 2025 plan, which is any company that wants to do business in China, they have to kind of give their trade secrets. Is this kind of part of that? Or last but not least, is it terrorist? What is it? So before we get into some of these topics, let's look at numbers. Here's numbers for you. Worldwide smartphone market, okay? 2018, Samsung was number one worldwide. They sold 292 million phones, okay? That's 20.8% of the marketplace. 2018, Apple sold 208.8 million, which is roughly 15% of market share. Huawei sold 206 million phones, which is 14.7%. Pat, what's the big deal here? Here's what's the big deal. 206 million phones. And many people watching this, you've never heard of Huawei before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But Huawei's third place? Yes. But here's what's important. Look at 2017 where they were at. Samsung sold 317.7 million. They were 21.7% of market share. Apple sold 215.8 million. They were 14.7. Huawei was 154 million. They were 10.5%, which means Samsung is down 8%. Apple is down 3.2%. Huawei is up 33.6%. That is such a big number. That's plus 50 million phones in 1 year when your competition is down 3.2% and your competition is down 8%. So when I looked at this, I said, okay, 206 million phones they sold. They're up 50 million. The U.S. government bans any U.S. companies of doing business with Huawei. But what is their risk? Are they so much in U.S. that this gives them a hard time to do business? Or are they more in China? So let's look at the numbers here of total smartphones sold in China 2018. Here's what it looks like. 2018, Huawei sold 105 million phones, okay, which made them 26.4% of all China market share. And Apple sold 36.3 million, they're 9%. And the year before, Apple sold 41 million, and the year before, Huawei sold 90.9 million. Look at this number, you notice Apple's down 11% and Huawei's up about 15-16%. So let's take a look at this. So if they sold 105 million phones, Huawei, in China alone, and total is 206, what percentage is that? 51%, which means 51% of their phone sales is strictly in China. So I know the U.S. banned U.S. companies of doing business with Huawei, but 51% is in business they're doing is in China, and 49% is outside of China. Very small in America, if any, is in America. Europe, other countries, right? Now watch Apple here. Out of Apple's 208 million phones, 36 million was sold in China, which is 17%. So here's the scary thing. U.S. government banned U.S. companies from doing business with Huawei. What would happen if China said, listen, this whole tariff thing is getting a little out of control. We are going to ban Chinese companies from doing business with Apple. What would that do to them? Because iPhone users, there are actively 900 million iPhone users worldwide, according to Apple. Out of the 900 million active, 300 million is coming out of China. Let me say that one more time. Out of 900 million active iPhone users, 300 million is coming from China. That's 33%. That's going to be a very big hit if China decided to turn it around on them. This is one of the reasons why Tim Cook and Trump are meeting together so regularly, because if all of a sudden China makes a decision like that, that's like a tariff on steroids against Apple, and Apple's the biggest company. They tank the market tank. So it's very fickle right now if this doesn't take place here and they figure out a resolution. But let me continue. These are the numbers we're looking at here. Huawei in sales. So in 2010, Huawei sold 3 million phones. Then they sold 20 million next year, 32, 52, 75, 108, 139, 153. And in 2018, obviously, they sold 206 million phones. Their total revenues in 2018 was $108.5 billion. That's up 21% from 2017. And if you look at the total numbers of phones sold, it's 780 million phones sold during that 8-year run that they went out. So now you look at this and you say, wow, it's pretty impressive. I mean, this is good stuff, but what did they do differently? I mean, isn't it just cell phones? Watch the amount of money they put into R&D, research and development. Intel in 2018 put $13.5 billion in R&D. Apple put 14.2. Apple, monstrosity, put 14.2. Microsoft, trillion-dollar company, 14.7. Huawei, 108 billion revenues, put 15.4 billion. And this is China labor we're talking about. This is not U.S. engineer cost. This is China labor we're talking about. Let me put that in perspective for you. Out of their 188,000 employees that they have, 75,000 of their employees strictly focus on R&D. Again, 75 out of 188 is strictly R&D. So after a while, we have Samsung 16.7, then Alphabet 21, then Amazon at the top with 28.8 billion into R&D. So you look at all this stuff, you know, okay, I mean, I get it, good products. They're constantly researching. They're trying to get better. They can't really do business in the U.S. right now. So I'm still not getting it, Pat. What is the big deal with these guys? What is the worry? Here's what it is. February of 2019, this is what President Trump tweeted. I want 5G and even 6G technology in the United States as soon as possible. It is far more powerful, faster, and smarter than the current standard. American companies must step up their efforts or get left behind. There is no reason that we should be lagging behind on something that is so obviously the future. I want the United States to win through competition, not by blocking out currently more advanced technologies. We must always be the leader in everything we do, especially when it comes to the very exciting world of technology. Let me read one sentence of this tweet again. Go back to, I want the United States to win through competition, not by blocking out currently more advanced technologies. What does that mean? I mean, isn't it banning Huawei, actually banning a better technology that's coming into U.S.? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Why are we doing that? But he wants 5G and 6G. And what's the big deal about 5G? What is 5G? What was 1G? What was 2G? Here's what's the difference. 1G was the brick phones back in the days. That's what 1G was. 2G was the old Nokia phones and a few other phones that were 2G. 3G, this is where the speed comes in. If you wanted to download a 2-hour movie on a 3G phone, it would take you 26 hours. If you wanted to download a 2-hour movie on a 4G phone, it would take you 6 minutes. But if you want to download a 2-hour movie on a 5G phone, it'll take you 3.6 seconds. Boom, you have the movie. Sitting there, iPad, 5G. I want to watch this movie. 1, 2, 3, boom, you have the movie. Go watch it. That's 5G. And that's scary. And by the way, 5G is not about phones only. 5G is about a lot of different technology they're going to be using for. Surveillance, cars, GPS, mapping, technology, internet, faster internet, so many different things they're going to be using with this. But again, what's the big deal about this 5G? Here's the big deal about 5G. When the race was taking place for 4G, US got it. And everybody said, oh my gosh, US won the race for 4G. You know how much it made US? $100 billion added to the GDP. Okay, added to the GDP. Let me tell you what the race for 5G is, whoever wins it. Whoever wins the race to 5G, it is 3 million jobs added to U.S. economy, and it's $500 billion added to the top line revenue, GDP. That's the race of 5G. That's why everybody's after it. But there's a big problem right now. Here's a problem. The race for 5G, China is already testing their 5G technology. And they are projecting that they will be done by 2020. They'll be the first country to be done with 5G, 2020, okay? Everybody else, US, Japan, South Korea, EU, everybody else is projected to finish by 2025. This is a scary thought, by the way, if they finish by 2025. That's a long time for that to be taking place. That is an advantage. So if they win the contract for 5G, they can go out there and give it to 57 different countries and say, we're not giving it to US, but we're giving it to these other countries. So China eventually can catch up by 2025 and pass US and be the dominant empire worldwide. You don't think they're thinking about that? That's the message they made when the Olympics was in China and they did the most amazing opening show. They want to compete. They want America to know we can compete with you. We're not worried about you. This is very, very competitive right now, right? And by the way, for some of you guys that use AT&T in US, and you may say, but my phone says 5GE. That's AT&T just changing the name of LTE to 5GE. It's a fraud. It's not really a 5GE. It's really a 4G, but they just changed the name to 5G for people to say, I got a 5GE phone. You can go research and look it up for yourself, which is brilliant, by the way, but it's not really brilliant because it's not 5G. So now, this is all the stuff we're looking at, the 5G issue. Now let's look at the timeline. Let's look at the timeline of how this whole thing took place and how we got here. Huawei got started back in 1987 by the founder Ren Zhengfei, which, by the way, he used to be part of the Chinese military, and he openly talks about the fact that he supports the Communist Party. Very open about it. So in December of 2001, Indian intelligence accused Huawei of aiding Taliban. We're talking 2001, that's 18 years ago. They're already having issues with an intelligence community of India. Then you go to 2003, they decided to start selling phones. Okay, fine. 2003, Cisco decides to sue Huawei for unlawfully copying intellectual property. This is something they've been accused of many times, but the first one goes back to 2003. Then in October of 2007, Bush administration warned on Huawei 3Com deal. They didn't want this deal to be taking place. So eventually, after a couple years, I think 3Com ends up doing the deal with Hewlett-Packard, but not Huawei. Okay, this next one's a little bit weird and interesting at the same time. October of 2010, former UK intelligence boss Andrew Hopkins joins Huawei. We're talking former UK intelligence boss, not just anybody. This guy's got 40 years plus experience in intelligence worldwide. You want to go work for Huawei. Why is Huawei trying to recruit you? Why are they trying to get into the UK information? What's the purpose behind it? Is it just because you got a fancy degree? Or maybe you got access to certain information that can help Huawei? Makes you think, don't it? March 2012, Huawei banned from Australian National Broadband Network. Another one. September of 2012, David Cameron brokers a £1.2 billion deal with Huawei. I don't want to read too much into it. Maybe they're just doing something because they want the technology to be stronger in UK. It could be as simple as that. But 1.2 billion UK after the head of intelligence, a little bit weird there. Okay. July of 2013, former CIA head Michael Hayden slams Huawei publicly, saying this is not a company anybody should trust. March 2017, WikiLeaks Vault 7 release feature Huawei backdoors. This is when people started seeing some things with CIA and saying, wait a minute, what is really going on with Huawei? I mean, it was a very big red flag. Maybe all these accusations that people are making is accurate. February 2018, director of CIA, NSA, and FBI warned U.S. citizens against using any Huawei products. Okay, so now this is when it starts getting interesting. April 2018, America alleges possible Iran sanction violation from Huawei. I think something's going on here. This is when, when U.S. has a sanction against Iran, that means you cannot do business with Iran and do business with U.S. But they were trying to kind of go around and figure out a different creative way of a subsidiary company to use, which we'll get to here in a minute as well. May 2018, Pentagon bans Huawei ZTE devices from military base. Okay, so now this is when things start getting ugly. December of 2018, the CFO of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, which is also the daughter of Ren, the founder of Huawei, gets arrested in Canada. Why does she get arrested in Canada? Well, because for the longest time, U.S. was trying to get her, and she was evading U.S. And finally, U.S. calls on Canada and says, you got to arrest her, and she got arrested. Why did she get arrested? Because they were using, potentially, allegedly, they were using a company called Skycom, which is a subsidiary. They say it's not, but it's a subsidiary of Huawei. They were using Skycom to do business with Iran. So this causes the chairman of Huawei in January 2019 to say the following: no market can keep us away. Is he insinuating that the 5G is going to be so strong that even U.S. has to figure out a way to do business with us? I don't know, but he said no market can keep us away. And on May 15, 2019, Trump signs the executive order banning any U.S. company of doing business with Huawei. And that's what brings us to where we are today. So look, you just had an information overload. You've been given so much different information. You're sitting here saying, holy moly, I had no idea this was taking place with Huawei. But let's talk about the spy part. Spying, espionage. You may say, well, Pat, you mean to tell me people are spying on us? You got simple questions to ask yourself. Would you rather have China spy on you, or would you rather have U.S. spy on you? What do you mean? If you use Huawei phones in U.S., maybe China has the ability to spy on you. Are you okay with China spying on you? Or if you use an Apple phone, are you okay with Apple being able to spy on you? Somebody says, There's no way in the world that can do that. Isn't that illegal? Let's just say it is illegal. There's a reason why people put Band-Aids on their cameras of their computers. They're not comfortable. Someone's watching me, right? Or are we more receptive to being spied on today? Or is this a new thing? It's been around for a while. If you try to figure that part out, you're going to start watching conspiracy theory movies. You're going to drive yourself nuts, and all of a sudden, start having nightmares at night, not sleeping, sweating all night long, right? Here's another question about spying. Would you rather have a private corporation spy on you or a government spy on you? If a private corporation spies on you, they do it all the time on Facebook. How do they do it? What is your buying patterns? They're simply spying on you to get more money out of you. That's what corporations do, right? But if a government spies on you, what do they spy on you for? Your next moves, controlling you, seeing what you're doing. I mean, these smartphones that we have, these Fitbits we put on, isn't it like a device to kind of track where we're going? So the point I'm trying to make to you is the following. Spying, if you go to the rabbit hole of spying, you're going to go so in too deep, you're going to get more scared about what could happen to you. That's the spying part, okay? But let me talk to you about what I really think is taking place and what I think the president, the administration, Tim Cook, and these companies need to be focused on today, and that is 5G, because this is the biggest thing. This 5G is the real issue. Let me explain why. China gets 5G in 2020 and say they give it to 57 different countries and not US, and we don't get it 5 years later. And what if they say, we don't want to do anything, forget about it. And all of a sudden, other countries in Europe, South America, start contacting them to do business with Huawei because they got 5G and they brokered deals, kind of like the Prime Minister, David Cameron. Cameron brokered a deal of 1.2 billion pounds with Huawei. What if other countries start doing this? What if all of a sudden everybody has 5G, everybody has incredible technology, and US's last 5 years? What if they go to every one of these guys, EU, South Korea, Japan, and they do it with them, but not with US? So now, watch what happens. When you're raising money and you deal with investors, here's what takes place. You, the entrepreneur, the owner, the shareholder, the investor comes in, you have 20 different markers to negotiate with. I want this much money. No problem. We want this much equity. No, I want fewer equity to give it to you. No, I want this much. No, okay, I'll give you this equity less, but I want to get dividends on the 20 million that I gave you. Well, that's too much dividends because it adds up to this. Yes, it does. Okay, I want 3 board seats. No way I'm giving you 3 board. I'm going to give you 2. So you go through the whole thing. And you, the investor, or you, the entrepreneur, have to decide which one you want to give up. U.S. is not in a power position with everything. I know it may seem like it, but they're not. Very simple. And this is the scariest part with the 5G. So President Trump, his administration, with all the advisors, Tim Cook, they all have to sit down and figure out what they're willing to give up and what they're not willing to give up. Because if they just go and say, I want all of it, it may crack 20, 30%, okay? It may crack. Because they're going to ask for something, because they have something that U.S. doesn't have. And that's 5G in a year. That's massive. So the tariffs, you want to put 25% on this, 25% on this, I put 25% on soybeans, you put 20. We can go back and forth all we want. But we got to sit in a room and lay all these things out. And U.S. has got to say to them, here's what we're doing. I'll cut the tariffs, but you got to give me 100% of the 5G license to U.S. 2020. When you get it, we get it as well. There's no way in the world I'm giving you. I want it right off the bat when you get it. I'm not doing it. Okay, give it to me 6 months after you get it, but you cannot do business with anybody else, but you can get a head start in China, just not anybody else. We're not doing it. That's the negotiation of getting 5G to 5 years, because we don't have it in U.S. Qualcomm. We're not ahead. There's a lot of people a lot of companies that are doing it. We're not ahead. They got to figure out a way to get this technology. That's how big it is. It's $500 billion. $500 billion to the GDP, 3 million jobs to the GDP. The battle's going to be a big battle. It's going to be interesting who wins this battle. But it's all about leverage, and they have the leverage on 5G, and they have the leverage on having a population of 1.5 billion people, and U.S. has got 330 million. And they have a leverage of their smartphone is not as expensive as the iPhone is, where Tim Cook is saying, I'm going to make the iPhone cheaper in China so I can compete with them. There's a lot of leverage. And I hope all the brains can come together and figure this part out. Because me, I'm just an entrepreneur giving this information to you. So having said that, if you watch this video, you want to go a little bit more into it and find out more about the U.S.-China trade war. I made a video titled U.S.-China trade war. You're going to enjoy watching this video. It's going to get very detailed into the tariffs. If you haven't watched it, click on this. If anything we talked about today, especially timeline, you want to go more into it, we're going to put the links below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please click on the subscribe button to sub to Valuetainment. Thanks for watching, everybody. Love you. Bye-bye.
Well, you might accuse me of focusing on the opinions of one guy, but I chose him because I thought that he was the most engaging, concise, and easy for non-financiers to understand. So is the trade deficit with China, indeed the entire trade policy with China, a serious problem or actually a good thing? With China, indeed the entire trade policy with China, a serious problem or actually a good thing? I urge you to look into this topic further. If nothing else, it is sure to be a hot button topic in the upcoming presidential campaign. In the meantime, this is Jim Siegel signing off for now. So long.